News of the Times. The murder of Emma Hunt. Cold case or Victorian injustice? Welcome to News of the Times. In today's episode, we journey back to 1893 to the quiet market town of Rochford, where the discovery of a woman's body in a brook sent shockwaves through the community. Emma Hunt, a widowed dressmaker and well-respected local figure, is found dying, her throat slashed, her hands bruised, and her umbrella shattered. A brutal murder, a carefully planned suicide, or something even more sinister? Witnesses tell conflicting stories. A teenage boy becomes the center of suspicion. A 6-year-old offers haunting testimony, and all the while, the shadow of Jack the Ripper lingers over public imagination. As always, we bring you the story through the original Victorian newspaper accounts, bridging together the narrative as it unfolded at the time. And in today's end of episode, for the particular story, we bring back an old story because it is just such a favourite of ours. In this story of 1897, we revisit the legendary rival of Queen Elizabeth I and Mary, Queen of Scots, but with a Victorian twist as their reincarnated counterparts were at it again. Will the Victorian Mary, Queen of Scots, finally outmaneuver her old foe, Queen Elizabeth, and settle the score centuries later? Rivalries repeating in reincarnated form. If you find yourselves inexplicably fascinated by mysterious brooks, suspicious umbrellas, or vengeful monarchs reborn in Victorian boarding houses, consider liking, subscribing, or sharing us with that one friend who still insists it was all the butler. Every click helps us to confuse the mighty algorithm, which currently thinks we're a knitting channel with murder problems. Now, dust off your bonnet, sharpen your walking stick, and let us step together into the shadows of the past. Background. Emma Hunt was a 38-year-old widow living in the quiet market town of Rochford, near Southend in Essex. A respected local dressmaker, she ran her own business from her home on North Street and was generally well thought of in the community. Her husband had died 7 years earlier, and in recent times, Emma was rumoured to be expecting to remarry, although some reports suggest that an engagement had recently been broken off, leaving her emotionally shaken. Emma was described as dressing modestly and typically seen with a black shawl and umbrella. There was no note of any scandal or impropriety in her background. In fact, Emma seemed to take pride in maintaining her respectability. As a letter found later amongst her papers suggests, she was concerned with keeping a clear conscience and a discredit-free life. Emma had a 15-year-old son, apprenticed in Southend. Just 2 days before her death, she paid him an emotional visit, saying goodbye with a disturbing finality and telling him she had left a black morning suit for him to wear when he came home on Sunday. The suit was later found, neatly folded and ready in her home. In the weeks prior to her death, neighbours noticed signs of emotional distress. She was seen behaving erratically, even running around a pond in a frenzied state. Her mood had become increasingly despondent. Alfred Hazel was a 14-year-old schoolboy, the eldest son of a local shoemaker living in the same town as Emma Hunt, Rochford in Essex. His background was described as respectable, and there is no indication that he had ever been in trouble with the law prior to Emma Hunt's death. On the night of the murder, Hazel was seen by multiple witnesses loitering near the brook where Emma's body would be found just hours later. Some accounts claim he was behaving oddly, even hiding in a bush. When approached, he reportedly gave inconsistent explanations for his presence, including that he was watching for a friend or trying to find something he'd dropped. It is the evening of Saturday, May the 20th, 1893, in the tranquil Essex town of Rochford. The day has passed much like any other. Quiet foot traffic, the sound of birdsong, and the occasional echo from the church bells. But at around 5 o'clock, the rural calm is shattered. Two railway porters, John Hazel and John Bird, hear a cry for help near a brook close to the churchyard. When they rush to investigate, they stumble upon a sight as grim as it is baffling. Partially submerged in the waters lie Emma Hunt, bruised, bleeding, and barely clinging to life. Her throat is slashed, her face gashed, and her umbrella broken, as if a struggle had occurred. 20 minutes after being discovered, Emma is dead. The woman was known, respected, and quiet. As speculation spreads like wildfire through the town, it is the newspapers that begin piecing together the first threads of this shocking mystery. From the York Herald, the 22nd of May, 1893, mysterious murder at Rochford. Since Saturday night, the small town of Rochford near Southend has been in a state of considerable excitement on account of what appears to be an extraordinary murder. At about 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, John Hazel and John Bird, railway porters, heard a cry for help and proceeding from a brooklet near the church. On reaching the spot, they found partially immersed a lady with her throat severely cut, hands bruised, and face somewhat gashed. Her umbrella was broken, and there were signs of a desperate struggle. She uttered a groan and died about 20 minutes after being discovered. The deceased is a Mrs. Hunt, aged about 40, a widow, carrying on business as a dressmaker at Rochford, where she was thoroughly respected. During the afternoon, she had been seen with a gentleman who was a stranger to the neighbourhood. Up to yesterday evening, no arrest had been made. Some papers, including the Lincolnshire Echo, immediately began reporting the case as a likely suicide, citing Emma's emotional farewell to her son, although this version of events would soon be challenged. As news of Emma Hunt's death began to spread, the Leicester Daily Post joined the chorus of speculation, echoing earlier reports. It reiterated the disturbing nature of Emma's wounds, the discovery by railway workers, and early police suspicions. The theory of suicide versus foul play gained attention, although neither seemed fully satisfactory. The paper noted that a sealed letter found amongst Emma's effects was to be opened only if her son misbehaved, hinting at a woman mindful of her moral reputation and perhaps struggling with inner turmoils. Still, many were reluctant to accept that a woman of Emma's standing and good name would take her own life in such brutal fashion. From the Leicester Daily Post, the 24th of May, 1893, the Rochford mystery, murder or suicide. The inquest opens. An inquest was held at Rochford near Southend yesterday, respecting the death of Emma Hunt, widow. Alfred Hazel, a groom, deposed to finding the deceased in a brook with her throat cut. John Bird, a signalman, stated that on receiving information from the last witness that a murder had been committed, he proceeded to the brook and found the deceased alive and groaning. There was evidence that a struggle had taken place. The medical evidence was to the effect that the wounds were not self-inflicted. They were bruises as well as cuts. The inquiry was adjourned. As the inquest opened, speculation swirled around the nature of Emma Hunt's death. Was it suicide, murder, or something more ambiguous? Public opinion tilted increasingly toward foul play, spurred on by Emma's injuries and the lack of a weapon at the scene. Behind the scenes, investigators were clearly growing uneasy. Although the early theories remained divided, police attention had begun to narrow, and just days later, a dramatic new development would push the case into the national headlines. From the Western Times, the 27th of May, 1893, the murder at Rochford, an arrest. Alfred Hazel, aged 17, who gave evidence at the inquest on the body of Emma Hunt, a widow aged 38, who was murdered in the wilderness in Rochford near Southend last Saturday, has been arrested and charged with having committed the crime. Hazel, in his evidence, stated that he found the woman in a dying condition and ran for help. He was charged yesterday before the Rochford magistrates. He entered the dock with an indifferent air, appeared perfectly cool, and spoke in a loud, clear voice. Inspector Chase stated that he arrested the prisoner at his residence. In answer to the charge, he said, "I did not do it." The accused was remanded until Wednesday. It is rumoured that a little boy named Wakeling, aged about 5 years, son of a signalman, witnessed the murder and that he has since stated, "We must not go into the wilderness playing again because we saw a man killing a woman with a big knife." With Alfred Hazel now under arrest, public attention surged, but the case was far from settled. The crime had been committed in broad daylight, near homes and railway workers. Surely someone had seen something. Then, from the unlikeliest sources, came a new witness. The words of a 5-year-old boy, as reported next by Lloyd's weekly newspaper, would bring fresh horror and chilling clarity to the tragedy in the wilderness fields. From the Lloyd's weekly newspaper, the 28th of May, 1893, a little boy's story. On Friday night, our special representative called at the house of Frederick Wakeling, a signalman at the Rochford railway station, in consequence of a rumour that his little boy was in the wilderness fields about the time of the tragedy. The boy in the garden. The little boy was in a large garden and on being called came and said his name was Alfred Wakeling. In reply to a question as to where he was the previous Saturday afternoon, he said he was in the fields. Asked whether he saw anybody there, he said yes, a man and a woman. The boy's recollection. The reporter then knocked at the door and obtained Mrs. Wakeling, his mother's, permission to question the child, who, she said, would be about 6 years old in June. The little fellow, who seemed very intelligent, then said, "I was going along the hedges looking for birds' nests, when I saw a man and a woman standing by the hedge near the gate by the water where the stepping stones are. I thought they were looking for birds' nests too. I saw the man throwing the woman down on the grass. She got up again and began to scream. The man had a large knife in his hand, and the woman struck at him with her umbrella. She hit him with the handle, and it broke. When I first saw them, the gate was shut, but he dragged her near the water. He then got behind her and held her. Next, I saw him trying to cut her head off with the knife. She was standing up. He pushed her into the water, and she fell on her face. After that, I saw him run away towards the church at Rochford Hall. I did not see her with any basket. She was wearing a black shawl, and the man was wearing a light jacket and light trousers. My father came up soon after and told me to go into the signal box. The father's account. Mr. Wakeling, the father, then said, "When I heard that a woman had been found in the brook with her throat cut, I ran down the bank and got to the scene as soon as I could. The woman had been raised up and was sitting against the bank with her feet in the water. Her eyes were turning from one side to another, and she looked pitiful, with blood streaming from her. I was startled to see my boy standing opposite to her, staring at her as though he was fixed to the spot. He seemed perfectly shocked and frightened, and I told him to go to my signal box and wait there for me, because I did not want him to go home and frighten his mother." The mother's account. Mrs. Wakeling said, "It's all perfectly true, just as he told me. He came home quite frightened. The first words he said to me were, 'Mother, don't you go into the wilderness or else you'll be murdered.' I said, 'Why?' And he said, 'Because there's a woman murdered there.' I said, 'Hold your noise and don't talk about such things. It's only some drunken woman, I suppose, that you've seen.' He said, 'No, it isn't. I saw a man trying to cut a woman's head off.' I then said to him, 'Where?' He said, 'By the stepping stones in the water where we lift the perambulator.' Then I began to think that perhaps he really had seen something, and asked him what he really had seen. And then he told me what he has told you, that he had seen a man with a big knife trying to cut a woman's head off. I then asked him what he did with the knife, and he said he took it with him when he ran away and ran out at the Cockney Gate. That is the name of the White Gate, and it is called that because most of the Londoners stop there. The child was traumatized. We had a fearful night with him, for he was so terribly frightened and troubled. At about 11:30 that night, he got up, walked down the stairs in his sleep, and came down here. We got hold of him quietly, and then he woke in a great fright. He has been suffering from the shock ever since, and we have been doing all we can to try and get him to forget it. He himself does not like talking about it." Alfred Wakeling's statement, strange, vivid, and unsettling, added a new dimension to the case. But was it the unfiltered memory of a child, or an imaginative retelling born from rumour? The inquest continued, steadily building towards its final days, with Hazel still held in custody and public opinion deeply divided. Investigators pressed forward with the help of medical experts, police testimony, and the final words of those closest to Emma Hunt. The Essex Herald, reported in June, captured the full atmosphere of the courtroom, its discomforts, contradictions, and the verdict that would either bring resolution or raise yet more questions. From the Essex Herald, 20th of June 1893, final day of the inquest. The adjourned inquest on the body of Mrs. Emma Hunt was held at the Old Ship Hotel in Rochford on Wednesday by Mr. C.C. Lewis, Mr. F.W. Francis, and he was foreman of the jury, and September Hawtrey represented the police, and Mr. J.E. Searle was present on behalf of the prisoner Hazel. Some stir was occasioned by a rumour that the prisoner had some mysterious packages and letters addressed to him, but the solicitor for the defence cleared up the matter by telegraphing to the governor of the prison at Chelmsford, who wired back that the letters merely contained a quantity of religious tracts. The coroner did not arrive until some time after the appointed hour, when he explained that the train he had come by had a narrow escape near Ramsden. The heat had so twisted the metals that had not the engine driver stopped the train, it might have run off the line. Anne Hazel's testimony. Mrs. Mary Ann Hazel, the prisoner's mother, said that on the 20th of May, the day of the murder, her son had dined at home and then went out. When he returned late in the afternoon, he said his feet were damp. She said to him, "What a sad thing has occurred," and he replied, yes, she had been told that it was her son who had found the woman. He did not say anything about his wet clothes. There was some blood on his jacket sleeve, but witness did not say anything to him about it. He took his shirt off on Sunday morning and she washed it on Wednesday afternoon. She showed it to Mrs. Ramsay because there was a rumour that it was covered with blood. There was not the least stain on it of anything. The shirt produced was the one her son was not in the habit of carrying a knife about with him, and he hadn't got one. No razor was taken away from the house before they were taken possession of by the police. In accordance with custom, the prisoner changed his jacket, waistcoat and trousers on the Saturday evening. Inspector Chase had them on Monday afternoon. They had not been washed in the meantime. The doctor's evidence read out. The coroner then read the evidence of Dr. James, who, in reply to one of the juries, said the handle of the umbrella found could not have inflicted the injuries to the back of the deceased's head. It was not heavy enough. The cartilage of the throat was irregularly fractured, which would suggest that the throat had been squeezed by a juror. The wounds on the back of the head might have been inflicted by kicking. Superintendent Hawtrey takes the stand. Mr. Sill, the Reverend Mr. Herbert, tells me there is another letter, and I am informed that it is connected with someone in Rochford or the neighbourhood, and there is a desire to keep it quiet. Superintendent Hawtrey. I found this letter in the bottom of a drawer in the deceased's house, among a lot of old papers. It was very dirty and written in pencil, very probably some years ago. It reads, "Dear Mr. S, you cannot think how hurtful it is to me when you say I behaved better to others than to you. It is true I have had plenty of temptations from those in good position, but I have a clear conscience. There is nothing discreditable in my past life and present. This is a secret. E. Hunt." Mr. Searle. Have you been able to find out whom the letter was addressed or from whom it was intended? Reply, no. It has evidently been written years before. Mr. Searle. Have you made any inquiries about it? Reply, how can I? Mr. Searle. Then there have been none. Reply, no, I can't make any. Mr. Searle. Can you tell me who it was walking with the deceased in the church meadow? Reply, no. Mr. Searle. Have you heard the Reverend Mr. Hadley says he has seen someone walking with the deceased? The reply came, no. The coroner's summing up. The coroner then proceeded to sum up. He said that in all human probability, if the wounds upon the deceased had been self-inflicted, an instrument would have been found close by the deceased. He went on through the various times given by the witnesses and said Hazel was seen coming down the Wilderness about 19 minutes to 5, and at quarter to that hour he went and told Miss Bishop about finding of the body. That would only give him 4 minutes in which to commit the murder if he were guilty. The most unfortunate part of the case was the absence of any instrument. Some observations had been made to the effect that Inspector Chase should have searched Hazel at once, but in his, the coroner's opinion, the inspector had given his evidence very clearly, and he said he was quite taken off his guard regarding the case at the time as one of suicide. But even if Hazel were guilty, in all probability he would not have had the instrument about him when he reported the discovery to the police. If the evidence adduced raised the strong presumption that Hazel committed the murder, it would be the bounden duty of the jury to find him guilty. But if, on the other hand, they were not satisfied, they could bring in an open verdict. The inquest verdict. At 3:45, the jury retired to consider their verdict, the public being readmitted at 4:50. The foreman said the jury had agreed upon the following verdict. We think that the deceased was murdered, and in our opinion the evidence points strongly to Hazel as the perpetrator of the deed. The coroner, that will be a verdict of wilful murder against Hazel. The coroner's inquest had delivered its verdict, murder by person or persons unknown, but while the court proceedings had ended, resolution remained elusive. The name Alfred Hazel still hovered uneasily in public discourse, and the case had gripped Essex with a mix of fascination and unease. Would there be a trial? Would new evidence emerge? And what would become of the teenage boy at the heart of the story? The Chelmsford Chronicle, reporting just a month later, offered the answer, and for many it came with more questions than comfort. From the Chelmsford Chronicle, 24th of July 1893, the prisoner Alfred Hazel, who is charged with the murder of Mrs. Hunt in Rochford, came out of the van smiling. He appeared not noticeably changed since his committal. Mrs. Hazel, his mother, called out, God bless you, dear boy, and several other friends saluted him with, Hello, Alf. The jurors were given the task of deciding whether or not to uphold the inquest verdict against him. With Alfred Hazel formally discharged and the legal case closed, one might assume the story of Emma Hunt had reached its end. But the press and the public were not so easily satisfied. The abruptness of Hazel's release, the unanswered questions, and the eerie details of the crime continued to stir speculation. For many, the conclusion had come too quickly and far too quietly. The Essex Newsman, published just days later, captured this lingering disquiet, offering both commentary and context as the town of Rochford tried to move on from a crime that refused to settle into silence. From the Essex Newsman, the 29th of July, 1893, the Rochford murder, Hazel discharged. Alfred Hazel, 17, groom, was indicted upon the coroner's inquisition to having wilfully and of malice and aforethought murdered Emma Hunt at Rochford on May the 20th. In reply to the charge, the prisoner, who, though somewhat pale, was in perfect possession of himself, answered in a firm voice, Not guilty. The prosecution case. Mr. Reitman Wood said that he appeared to prosecute with his friend Mr. Duffield. The prisoner was charged upon the coroner's warrant. Yesterday a bill of indictment was before the grand jury, and they, after a long and careful consideration, came to the conclusion that it was a case in which there was not sufficient evidence to put the prisoner on his trial. The prosecution had agreed that it would not be right for them even to invite the petty jury to come to any other decision than that to which the grand jury had come. Therefore, the course, subject to the consent of his lordship, which they proposed to pursue was not to place any evidence before them upon this inquisition. The judge in full agreement. The judge. Gentlemen, I entirely approve of the course that is proposed to be taken. It appears to me, upon examining the depositions, there was no evidence to justify any suspicion of the prisoner, except the opinion of the medical men, and I have no doubt that it appeared to the grand jury that the depositions do not represent the deliberate opinion of those gentlemen, and upon that they properly came to the conclusion, the wise conclusion, that the young man should not be put upon his trial. Accepting that conclusion, it is not proposed to proceed with the finding upon the coroner's inquisition, and you will therefore say that the prisoner is not guilty. A verdict of not guilty. The clerk of assize. What is your verdict, gentlemen? The foreman of the jury. Not guilty. An appeal for a helping hand. The judge. Discharged, I am clearly of the opinion there was no good ground except what I stated, the opinion of the medical men for putting Hazel upon his trial, and I hope he will go back to the neighbourhood from which he has come and will not be treated with suspicion or aversion. Every right-minded man can sympathise with him in the position in which he is placed, and I hope those who can will hold out to him a helpful hand. Though local proceedings had concluded and no one stood trial for the murder of Emma Hunt, public imagination had not been laid to rest. Whispers persisted. The manner of the attack, the quiet setting, the brutal wounds, it all stirred uncomfortable echoes of something deeper, darker, and perhaps familiar. Nor were Rockford's townsfolk alone in their unease. Weeks later, newspapers far beyond Essex were still invoking one chilling possibility. Had the Ripper returned? The Shields Gazette, Daily Gazette, 14th of August, 1893. Jack the Ripper again? Is it possible that Jack the Ripper is about again? Is it possible, further, that he is the culprit in the Rochford murder mystery? It is true Essex is not Whitechapel, but in communications which there is a good reason for supposing were genuine, the Ripper did not bind himself to any locality in continuing his work. She was a respectable person. An objection to the view that the Ripper may have been at Rockford is that the victim was a respectable person, not of the class whom the Ripper regarded as his mission to slay. Most true, let the argument have all its weight, but it remains to be observed that, pressed by time, even this maniac might mistake the character of his victim. No doubt that it was murder. Whatever the view may be taken of the theory that Jack the Ripper is still amongst us, one thing is clear, and that is that what has been is now, if it were not before, to be regarded as in the category of the possible. Now, there can be no doubt that Mrs. Hunt was murdered. It could not have been suicide. The deep wounds in the neck, the blows on her head, the cuts on the backs of her hands, the broken umbrella and fragments of clothing about pointed to an assailant. No murder weapon found. And even more important still was the most careful search from that day to this. No knife, no deadly instrument of any kind had been found in the vicinity of the woman's terrible death. In conclusion, a certain parallelism between Rockford and some of the Whitechapel murders may be pointed out. Speed of the Ripper. One point of resemblance is in the rapidity speed marked the Ripper's crimes. The Mitre Square murder, for instance, with all its intricate dissections, was accomplished within 5 minutes. An experienced surgeon at the London hospital experimentally tried a portion of the same dissection and was barely able to equal the Ripper's record for the whole of the operation. At Rochford, the struggle, the murder, and the escape must have occupied less than 5 minutes. No sounds were heard. Another point of resemblance is noiselessness. Most, although not all, of the Whitechapel murders were done without a sound being heard, when the least unusual noise would have been perceived by people either lying awake or reading or working a few yards away. Not a sound was heard at Rochford. Although the railway station is only 320 yards off and the churchyard was only 160 yards, not a cry was heard at the railway station, and not a cry was heard by a lady who was in the churchyard placing her flowers on her mother's grave. Further particulars. In this week's dip into Victorian melodrama, the Illustrated Police News reports a tale so baffling that even the medium involved probably didn't see it coming. 2 Parisian ladies, one a youthful widow, the other a more seasoned spinster, visited a local medium for some spiritual guidance. Instead of news of their futures, they were treated to a bombshell from the past. The medium declared one to be the reincarnated Mary Queen of Scots, and the other, rather less flattering, as none other than Queen Elizabeth I. Naturally, Mary demanded back pay for her unfortunate beheading, which Elizabeth obligingly handed over. Mary then eloped with Elizabeth's nephew, apparently the soul of Bothwell in disguise, and together the ghostly couple proceeded to drain poor Elizabeth's purse of further funds, citing centuries-old grievances and a very modern appetite for francs. From the Illustrated Police News, the 23rd of January, 1897. 2 great historical rivals, Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary of Scots, have lately reappeared in Paris, and Queen Elizabeth has been unfolding the story of her wrongs before a well-known police commissionary. It seems, says a correspondent to the Daily Graphic, that 2 Parisians, one a young and attractive widow and another a single lady of riper years, went lately to a well-known medium living in one of the rich quarters of Paris. The wizard was unable to tell them much about their future. It would have been well for the elderly lady if she could have done so, but her revelations about their past were truly startling. "You," she said to the fair widow, "were once the hapless Queen of Scotland, and you," she turned sternly to the alarmed prisoner, "you are none other than the cruel Elizabeth of England." Both ladies departed deeply impressed, and that same evening Mary Stuart borrowed a considerable sum from Elizabeth of England as damages due for imprisonment, ill treatment, and being beheaded in another age and another body. This was not, however, the end. Mary Stuart next ran off with Elizabeth's nephew, in whom she professed to recognise the soul of Bothwell. Him she married, much to the distress of England's Queen, who objected strongly to receiving Mary Stuart into the bosom of her family, though the discovery of Bothwell's soul made matters historically correct. The unfortunate Elizabeth was then exploited by both husband and wife, who claimed frequent sums of money on the grounds of the ancient historic wrong. She could in no sense call her soul her own, and finally she appealed to the police. The result is that Mary, Bothwell, and the medium have all disappeared, and the police much want to find them. Right, Item the first. The case is now closed. Emma Hunt's mystery has been unravelled as far as time and crumbling newsprint will allow. The coroner has packed up his moustache and the jury has gone for tea. If you've enjoyed this grim little promenade through Victorian justice and the bonus tale of Elizabeth I being financially exploited by a French reincarnation of Mary Queen of Scots, then we have but one humble request. Like, subscribe and share. Yes, we know, terribly forward of us, but vital if we're ever to bamboozle the algorithm into recommending us someone other than your nan's knitting group. Send us to your chums, your arch nemesises, your postman, even your cat, particularly if they show signs of being the spiritual heir to Bothwell. Every click helps keep the gaslight burning and the umbrella menders in steady work. Until next time, keep your walking sticks sharpened, your letters sealed, and your alibis firmly rehearsed. Should today's tale have stirred your appetite for more soot, scandal, and suspiciously well-mannered mischief, might we nudge you gently towards our Patreon? Behind its modest digital doors lie over 600 ad-free historical documentaries, lovingly arranged like a scandalous correspondence in a vicar's locked drawer. No interruptions, no clickbait, just crime, corsets, and curiosity on tap. Best enjoyed with a shawl, a sherry, and the firm belief that history never behaves itself. And if your taste leans toward the cheerful, unhinged, do peek in on our Robin & Co. blog, home to daily ramblings, questionable theories, and at least one recurring hedgehog with editorial opinions. Both links lurk just below. Click if you dare, or better yet, if you're delightfully bored of behaving. This has been News of the Times, and I am Robin Coles, Senior Assistant to the Deputy Ferret Wrangler, specialising in calming ferrets during ceremonial maypole dances.